Aneira Applegate. I am from North Shield. Mundanely, I am in Madison, Wisconsin. Just my little background. I've ran a lot of events in the SCA. I think I have 19 completed right now with 2 more in the works. That would have been done, but the pandemic hit. I just love planning events. It's something I've always loved, and it makes me really happy. So today I'm just kind of going to go over the basics on planning an event. I'm going to try to put in times where, post-COVID and how things might apply, but all of my notes are pre-COVID event planning. So the first most important thing you need to do when planning an event is knowing what kind of event it is. Are you doing a brand new event that your group has never held? Are you doing a kingdom event, so like a crown or a coronation, or a rum style event? In North Shield, it's Sun, Stellar University of North Shield. Because until you know what kind of event you're going to run, you can't look for sites or anything like that. You need to know what you're doing at the event. Running a crown tournament is very different than running an ANS event. Spacing is different. So you kind of need to know. If it is an event that you're unsure of space, for example, if you're going to run an event that all it is armored combat tournaments, one right after another, boom, 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 boom. If you've never run an event like that or helped with an event like that, and you don't really know about like spacing, like how much room do they need, what is all needed with that, I would talk to your local Knights Marshal, or if you're friends with someone in armored combat, talk to them because they're going to have that better understanding. I was spoiled in that sense. My husband's a knight, and so I've been around fighting a lot. However, the first time I was involved in an event that was rapier focused, I didn't know. I didn't have all those details like readily, known because of my experiences in the SCA. So when I started working on an event that included rapier, I talked to my friends that are very into rapier so that I have that knowledge before I try to find a site. So once you know what you're going to do, your next big step is finding a site. Because if you can't find the site, you can't have the event. Or at least not this time way you're trying to run. Sorry, words are a little hard right now. I need more caffeine. So when looking at a site, you need to tour the site usually. Well, you always want to tour the site before you sign a contract to do the event there. But you have to look at, will this site work for armored or rapier, or are there enough classrooms to do an ANS event? Things like that. When you tour sites, I highly recommend taking with you anyone that would be on your staff. For example, if you're going to have a feastocrat and you've never done a feast or never been part of that, take your feastocrat with you to look at the event so that they can look at the kitchen and the facilities to know if it's going to work for what they want to do for a feast. If you're not 100% sure about enough room for armored or rapier, take the Knights Marshal or the Rapier Marshal with you to look at it. If you're doing an event that has thrown weapons and archery, I would take a marshal with you so that they can see it and tell you if that will work. And this is assuming you're not any of these things and don't know it, but it's always great to have that second set of eyes. All the caffeine. The other things that you're going to want to look at when in site is, one, just general populous space? Is there room for court? Things like that. Um, you can also look at how accessible, you should look at how accessible it is. As Betta and I can both agree that a lot of sites say they're compliant, but they're really not. um, I work in the disability services field, so I unfortunately know this all too well from going out into the community with people that I worked with. I'm not going to go into super in depth. Both Esbeta and I teach a class on event planning with disability services, but just a couple things to look at. You know, can they get to all levels of the building that are going to be used? Or are they limited to just one? I'm going to use a site that we used for coordination a couple times here in Wisconsin. Super easy to get to the main level, like where most-ish of the stuff happens. Nice inn, a flat inn. It's great getting in. It's big open spaces. But then when we look at the lower level or the bathrooms, it's a different story. So there are no elevators in the building. The only way to get to the lower level, which is where the kitchen is, and so where the food is kind of a steep ramp. And by kind of, I mean it is outside to get to the lower level. So if we're using this event in the winter, it's probably not safe for people in a wheelchair to go down. And the steps are kind of steep too inside. And we're talking with anyone with mobility concerns. So you have that. If you go in the bathroom and you look at the handicap stall, you're like, this is ridiculous. But technically it's in compliance because it is the correct square footage, but it doesn't really have a way for people in a wheelchair to turn around easily. It's a very awkward shaped one. And I always call that's letter of the law, not spirit of the law. So that, and there's a whole bunch of other things to look at when we're looking at accessible sites. But like I said, that's a different class. The other things with sites to look at, one is cost. You don't want to spend $1,000 on site alone when it's only going to be like $500 worth of people coming in. You don't want to do that to your group. Well, we are a nonprofit organization. That does not mean we should be losing money on events. We need to make money on events so that we can keep having those events. Now, I'm not saying you spend $500 on your event and you make $3,000. Not what I'm saying. But if you're spending $500 on an event, you minimum need to bring in $500 more. Like, you need to at least break even. The reason also I always say it's good to make a little bit of money, again, not saying 3,000, is sometimes you will have events where you lose money. You just do. You know, for me, being in Wisconsin, weather's a big issue. You know, where we've planned weather events and we're expecting 100 people and we got 50. You know, it's things like that. That's why it's always good to make a little bit of money. Next question, where do I find sites? A lot of traditional spots, at least around me, is like schools, churches, and fairgrounds, which are all great places to start. Again, depending on the event, it might not be an option though. In schools, like let's say you're going to have a brewing competition, you can't have that if the site is a school because you can't have alcohol on site. Some churches also don't allow alcohol on site. But then I always push the, you know, looking outside the box for sites. Here we have used VFWs on multiple occasions. They're really great. There's other I can't remember. There's other similar venues. Like, I want to say I did one at like the Moose's Lodge one time. Not that I'm 100% sure what the Moose's Lodge is, but they were really great working with us, so it was fine. Um, but think outside the box. Think of other places. Um, don't be afraid to call other places. Parks are really great, depending on what the building they have and what the event is. Um, Sometimes when I'm looking for an event, if it's going to be bigger, I've just gone and like Googled wedding venues in the area just to give me ideas and whatnot. Um, Hockey rinks. A lot of times hockey rinks doesn't have ice on in the summer. I have autocratted 2 or 3 events at a hockey rink that had ice off in the summer, and it worked great. All of them were armored combat events or armored and rapier events, and it worked great for fighting. We had also my Barney had coronations there and have had crown tournaments there. So my big advice is think outside the box. Um, Next thing we want to think about, and I kind of mentioned having this before going to sites, is having your staff. As the event planner, it is not your job to do everything. You are just organizing people to do their thing. I also don't believe in micromanaging my staff because they're amazing. Like they want to be there, they want to do this, unless I wrote my husband into something. But he still is usually happy about it. So you're going to have to look at staff. So what staff is needed depends on what kind of event you're doing. There are a couple things that always are needed. You need someone to run gate, and that's depending on what kingdom you are, depends on the law on that. In North Shield, for example, you have to be a member to be in charge of gate. You have to be a paid member, and your local exchequer has to approve whoever's running gate. That's because of legality reasons, and I believe that's probably true across kingdoms, just because of the handling of money. And then your gate person will not only be in charge of handling money, they will be the ones finding staff to help run gate when people get there, in charge of the money after counting and getting it to the exchequer. Now, while the person who's running gate has to be a member, not everyone who's working the gate table has to be a paid member, but one person at the table always has to be a paid member. And they're the ones handling the money. If you're going to have a feast or even just a lunch, you have someone in charge of that. And again, they usually find their own staff to help them do the lunch or feast. I know that some of the feastocrats I know can be a little picky sometimes about who's helping them, at least for certain items. And then, walk-ins are always, they're always willing to have the extra help. But they probably want to pick like 2 or 3 people to help them so that they know and just work together. I am not a feastocrat. I've done a lunch once, and that's probably all that's ever going to happen. Man, I love autocrats, or not autocrats, feastocrats, for what they do and the food they put out. It's just not my strong suit. This is also true for gate. Yeah, no, like I love them. Like they're amazing. It is not something I can do. All right, and then for other staff, royalty liaison. So if you know that there's royalty coming or that royalty might be coming, we should have a royalty liaison. And they're just kind of there to be between the chamberlain and to see what is needed, like what do the royals need, and and things like that. They're also the ones that are going to have the royalty room ready, so they'll have everything ready for them in there. And just they help to make sure that the royalty has what they need for the event. And then other staff. Um, so you pretty much need one person to be in charge of one activity per each activity. So if there's armored combat, um, you need a marshal for that, an armored marshal. This does not include crown tournament or kingdom events because those are run a little different. But if you're having rapier, you need a rapier marshal, etc. If you're having an A&S classes, you want someone in charge of that to organize those classes and get them set up. If you're having an A&S display, I would have someone be in charge of that, and just kind of, places to delegate. So I said the reason that crown tournament does not apply, and it also doesn't completely apply to coronation either, is because I always call those cookie cutter events. And the reason I say that is that we know what happens, right? It's this, A, B, C, and D are what happens at this event. It's the same every time. And you're not having to plan out anything like, oh, what is our theme going to be? What is this? It's kind of standard what's known. And the other thing with crown tournament is you don't need to find marshals for crown tournament. This is the kingdom earl marshal is the main marshal and then finds other marshals to help with that. So that's why it's a little different. Coronation, usually there's both an armored and a rapier tournament, and you still need to find marshals for them. Okay. So that's staff. All right, so now we have a site, we have staff. So what we're going to need to do then is we need to put together a tentative schedule and brain stopped, and a budget. So tentative schedule, it's just for the bid. So when you ask your group to approve it, they kind of know what's going on. You're going to include things like planned activities, when site opens, when it closes, kind of just a tentative of what's going to happen. And it will vary event to event. I think the only time I've really used the same schedule is like I've planned the same event like repeatedly in years. So I just use the same bid and change the dates because nothing else on it changes. So if we're talking about budget, so some of the things to think about for your budget. And again, this is some pre-COVID stuff. I'm hoping it eventually goes back to this stuff, but that's how it was pre-COVID. So things you need on there is you need your event site. How much is that costing? Right? Make sure you head on, you separate, the event thing. If you have to do a key deposit, if you have to do a cleaning deposit, things like that. Are there anything else you need to run the event? Does your site want just the insurance that we can print out, or do they need an actual copy of the insurance? Like that we have to email corporate for? That's in there. Or if there's equestrian, do we need the equestrian waiver policy? Are there site tokens or booklets that need to be printed and made, and there's cost for them? And then kind of any other miscellaneous supplies. Do you need something specific for the list field? For, right now we can't have any community food or water bearing, due to COVID. So this is one of those before times things that we'll hopefully get back to after. So things like that. I have an opinion on site tokens. I'm not big on site tokens, I'm not going to lie, but it kind of depends on the event. And it depends on the site token, but I'm not a huge fan of them. But that's because I'm old. If you're having lunch or feast, those are two separate budgets. You would not put them in the event budget. And the reason is when we look at the budget, we need to look at how many people we need to break even. Feast is paid for separately. Lunch is paid for separately. So technically we'll have 3 budgets. And the reason is, all right, so I have a bid sitting next to me. So the site bid was $400 total. Does she have her break-even point? Okay. Her break-even point was 40 people because the site fee was $10. So she needed 40 people to show up to break even. But her lunch she only had a lunch budget, which was also $500. And her break-even point was 50. We can't put those two together because it will throw off those break-even points when trying to figure out how much we should charge people for the event and for lunch. Because unless lunch is included in that site fee, it'll throw things off. So you always separate the different costs. So like if you have your site fee, you have your lunch fee, you have your feast fee. If they are all separate fees, they all have separate budgets. Also, I know this is an unpopular opinion. If you want to include lunch into the site fee, it's very hard to do because I've known too many events that have done that, and then people don't get lunch because they have more than they expected. So people were paying for lunch and not getting it, and they weren't happy about that. Which is why I recommend not doing that. Or you could have the opposite happen. You made enough lunch for 100 people, 50 showed up. What are you going to do with those other 50 lunches? So let's see. And then, so we take the budget, we take what we think will attend, and then we divide that to get our fee, right? That's how much we know to charge. And so let's say we have a $500 budget. We expect 100 people to come in. It's $5, right? And that's what I would do for our site fee. It's always better if more people come than don't. It's okay to make money on events. And again, I'm not talking make $3,000 off of our friends, but if you make a little bit of money, that gives your group a little room, like last year, my Barony was supposed to have so in 2020, we were supposed to have, I think, 6 events that I know of, that I can think of, and we had 2. So having that little bit of wiggle room in the bank account and whatnot is good for your group. Again, not saying 3,000 on the event, but just having a little wiggle room, a little bit of comfort is good. Um, so now that we have budgets, now that we have a site fee and a site and all of those things, all we do is write that into depending on your group, let me preface that. Each group accepts or does bids for events differently. I have planned events for 3 different groups just within North Shield, and each one has been different. So that's one thing to know. What I do after I have all of my information is I write a bid. And depending, drop my phone. And depending on where you live and what your group does, will be different how they accept them. My kind of standard is the name of the event, who's hosting, and then I just kind of break it down. So I have the date of the event, the site, planned activities, when site opens and closes. I have the fees. So what's the adult fee? What's the adult member fee? What's the children's fee? Is there a family cap? One step back to children's fees. Children don't have to pay for the non-member surcharge, which that's not what they're calling it anymore, if the children's fee is lower than the adult fee. If it is the same as the adult fee, then they do. So I always try to make children's fees less, just as an FYI. One other quick thing about site fees, I always try to do it on $5. So it's a 5, it's a 10, it's 15. Always in increments of 5, because whoever's running gate will thank you for not having to deal with a bunch of ones. Because the non-member surcharge, again, which is not what they're calling it, is $5 also. So anything you can, if you can do it in the $5 increment, it's always better. Or at least your gate person will love you. So you have your fees, if there's a family cap, how much lunch is. It's always good to put in site restrictions as far as like ADA accessible, if you have that information. Is outside food allowed? Is site wet, or is it dry, or is it partially wet? I mean, I'm from Wisconsin, so that's probably one of the most important things. Excuse me. So you're going to want to note all those things in the bid. And it's always good to have this information too, because this is all going to go on your website, which I'll get into here in a minute. Then you're going to have your event staff, who, and you may not have a full event staff yet. I know I've ran some events where, like I didn't know who was going to be the royalty liaison if I needed one, or who was going to do lunch right away. I try to have those when I put my bid in, but sometimes you don't. Especially the food ones are probably important ahead of time so that they can see the site. Unless it's a known site, your Barony is used repeatedly, and the kitchen is good, or whatnot. This event bid has the event steward, royalty liaison, and lunch steward. It's also good to describe the site as best possible. And if you have a chance to pull either pictures off their website, or when you look at it, have pictures of it, this will give people a better idea of what it's like. For me, I'm very visual, so I like the pictures when looking at a site, or I like seeing it in person. But if it's not my event, seeing the pictures help for me. You're going to have that budget in there. You're going to have your break even point, like how many people do I need to show up to break even? And then you have your expected attendance, um, which is sometimes hard um, to decide or try to figure out. Um, if this is like a kingdom event that your kingdom has done 1,000 times, crowns, coronations, um, you can always ask past people, like, what do you think I should expect? Things like that. Um, I have done both in North Shield. I've done, yeah, both. I'm not going to try to figure out how many. It's too early in the morning for me to think. Um, Talk to someone who's autocredited before in your kingdom. They're going to be able to give you a better answer on expected attendance if you're doing one of those kingdom events. Um, Especially if it's someone in your group or like close to your group. Um, for example, North Shield's huge size wise. So asking me asking someone in the middle of South Dakota, how many people did you have coronation? Compared to if someone asked me in Madison, where a lot of the populace is in Wisconsin, are going to have two very different answers, just because of location. Um, but it's still good to ask people, especially for crowns and coronations. You could also ask about other events. Ask groups who've done something similar. You know, like if you're doing a rum style event, and almost I think every kingdom has a rum style event. Um, like I said earlier, North Shield does Sun, which is Stellar University of North Shield, but it works in a very similar way. So talk to people, ask them, ask what they've seen. Um, Talk to people from out of your kingdom to get ideas for the events. Um, there's an event that my barony normally holds that friends in other kingdoms were like, "Can I steal this? Go for it," you know. Um, but also know that different kingdoms do things slightly differently, and then baronies and shires do them even more differently. For example, I was talking to someone in Drachenwald. All their events are pre-reg. That's it. Everything is pre-reg. This was pre-COVID. It was pre-reg, everything. But in Europe, mass transit's a huge thing. A lot of people don't necessarily have cars that drive, or they might be flying in to go to the event, because that happens regularly in Drachenwald. Especially if they're going to the UK or they're in Scandinavia and flying to a different part of the continent. I remember I talked to someone from Sweden at Penzek one year. And part of why he stays where he does is he's not that far from a international airport if he's in that city, and it's easy for him to get a cheap flight quickly to anywhere there's the event in Drachenwald. But yeah, Drachenwald's all pre-reg. And now, of course, the rest of the SCA is also pre-reg right now because COVID. Okay, so the event, budget is that last part that we kind of talked about that goes on that event. Thoughts with COVID. So this is going to be ever changing because as COVID changes, so do we. And the rules. So when event planning with COVID, and I've not put a ton of thought into this because I haven't thought about doing in-person events in a while now. I did do 2 virtual ones, which was a whole new experience. I can give you, actually, before I go into COVID, well, I mean, it's COVID related. Couple things to know about virtual events. Both of the ones I did were teaching style. So one was virtual fighter school and the other was virtual service symposium. Is you're going to get a lot more diversity when teaching virtual events, I found, because people just stay home and do it. You're also going to get attendees from across the known world. Virtual Fighter School had someone from Locock. Service Symposium had someone from Drachenwald. You know, it's that. But you also get, was fun for me. I love, probably teaching events are probably my favorite thing to event plan, is people had access to some of the best teachers in the known world because no one had to travel either way. You know, for example, Branos taught at my virtual fighter symposium that I worked on, and he was in Michigan, and I didn't make him try to drive to Wisconsin, right? Like he has done before. We had people from Outlands. One of my teachers was from West, who was interrupted by his very adorable little one. You know, you kind of have that. And for me, that's been the fun part of event planning during COVID, is I got to see friends from all over like pop up on my computer screen, and I loved it. So planning non-virtual events post-COVID is going to be hard, not going to lie, just because policy is always changing. With my job, I'm used to quick change policy, but it does. It's going to change rapidly. Things that I would recommend. I know that right now, society-wide, I believe it came out, you have to pre-reg, like that's it. North Shield, I know, is doing that. But when I heard about opening in limited numbers, I said the only way it will work is if people pre-reg. Because you don't, again, the kingdom I live in is very spread out. I wouldn't want to drive to South Dakota to find out I was number 51 compared to. Yep, absolutely. I do attend stuff in Mid-Realm because I live not even an hour from the border. And actually my Pelican is in Mid-Realm. Who's her Pelican too? Yeah, like I've gone to events in West, I've gone to events like East. I mean, technically this is a Mid-Realm event and it's where I am. So it's very exciting. I know other people have not liked virtual SCA. The only thing really that I'm missing that virtual SCA doesn't give me is hugging my friends. Yo, like, I want to hug my friends. Like, I miss them. But yeah, so COVID. One thing I would probably recommend for events going forward for a while, if they can do it, if they can fit it in their budget, though we'd have to be careful about the legality of it, is having like pump hand sanitizer for people when they get to the event. You know, that's really the big thing I can think of, because everything else is fairly well covered by the bod. You know, it's mask being required, all those things. Though I think I just saw that you don't have to wear a mask under your helmet at practice starting July 1st. I think that's what I saw.
We don't have a mask rule at all after July 1st.
Yeah, I'm sure I saw that's what Zig posted. Only if you're vaccinated, though.
Not even that. It's a no mask at all for anybody required, because we can't ask about vaccination statuses either. So
I think the ways they worded it was it's highly encouraged for you to wear a mask if you are unvaccinated.
Yeah, we just can't ask.
Right. But it's
Specifically.
just, you just said you're encouraged to do that if you're not vaccinated.
Yeah. I'm going to give you the heads up. We've got about 10 more minutes.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Because that was kind of my basics of it all. If no one has questions, that's kind of where I am. So when you let general public in, so those are, let me see. Insurance wise, no, there's not. So sometimes, and I've been at these events where they're doing what they call demos at the events. During those times, there's one of two things that have to happen. They're in, or sometimes both. It's limited where they can be on a site. And two, usually they have to have a guide to kind of show them and demo what the SCA does. General public, well, I mean, people don't have to be members to come to events, but then they have to make the attempt and all that. But if they're just wanting to see like a demo of what the SCA is, it's a guide and they're limited where they can go, because we don't want people who are not part of the SCA, not paying site, to be wandering through people's camps, especially because that's not fair to the people we support. Sorry, that was my work voice coming out. That's not fair to the Scadians that paid their site fee, and they don't want random people who didn't even pay a site fee, don't know anything about the SCA, wandering through their camps. So that's why, like, events like we have one called Dub Dub or Warriors and Warlords, they'll do public tours. And so, and where that's through is usually the merchant area, ANS classes. Depending on how things are set up, they'll see armored and rapier. The merchants, I don't know if I mentioned that one, you know, kind of, oh, sometimes we'll have camps that are like uber authentic that have given us permission to show them their camp to see how authentic it can be. But usually it's limited. So, but again, anyone can come to an event. They just have to pay the fees. And if they're not a member, it's an extra $5. And they have to make an attempt at pre-16th century clothing or pre-17th century clothing. But yeah, like there was an event called Autumn Rose here in North Shield, and my parents wanted to see what I was doing because they had never been to an event. And they have a like demo area there for it. And that's how I showed my parents what I do. Funny enough, that was the night I met my husband. So I met him at that event. So yeah, there's ways of doing it. Absolutely. Let me. I did just put my email in the chat. And then that's my name on Facebook, which happens to also be my SCA name. If anyone wants to add me or talk or any of those things, I'm always happy to answer questions about event planning. Like I said, I've done a few of these, and sometimes my brain does not always remember everything to say. My husband was giving me a hard time the other night, and he's like, that I don't, basically, like as much as like that I don't have a PowerPoint and break it out and all that. And I'm like, you don't do that for the classes you teach. But that is all I have unless people have questions. think that might be it, Espeta.
All right. Well, thank you for teaching.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
happy. Awesome. Thank you.